The secret ingredient. In the village of Eldora, there was a woman named Lara, known far and wide for her exceptional cooking. Her small food stall at the village market had become the talk of the town, and her meals were praised by everyone, men, women, and children alike. Lara had a gift for cooking that seemed almost magical, and she took great pride in her work. No one could match her skills in the kitchen, and she made sure to stay on top of her game, always adding something new to her menu. Her food was so delicious that people traveled from all corners of Eldora to taste her meals. Yet, there was something strangely powerful about Lara's food, something that even the men of the village couldn't resist. They couldn't seem to stop coming to her stall for their meals, and soon, Lara's food became their one true craving. It wasn't just Lara's food that was drawing the attention of the village men, it was the effect her cooking had on them. Once a married man tasted her food, it was as if they couldn't enjoy anything else. No matter how delicious the food their wives prepared at home, it could never compare to Lara's dishes. This was a problem for the wives of Eldora, as their husbands no longer found joy in their cooking. Every evening, groups of married men would gather at Lara's stall, sitting together, sharing stories, and enjoying meal after meal of her famous dishes. At home, their wives served them their best meals, but the men refused to touch their plates, claiming that nothing could be as good as what Lara made. This created tension in the village households. Wives began to notice the change in their husbands. "Why won't you eat my food?" they would ask. "It's not as good as Lara's," their husbands would reply. This left the wives feeling frustrated, helpless, and confused. Why had Lara's food become so irresistible? As days turned into weeks, the women of Eldora began to talk amongst themselves. It was clear that something had to be done. Their marriages were suffering because of Lara's cooking. But what could they do? They decided to meet and discuss their options. "I think we need to find out the secret of Lara's cooking," one woman suggested. "Maybe there's a special ingredient that she's using. Maybe it's something we can't even taste, but our husbands can." Another woman agreed, saying, "I heard that she does something strange with her food. Maybe we should go to her restaurant and ask her directly." The women all agreed on one thing: they couldn't keep letting this go on. If they don't act soon, their husbands might never come back to them. They needed to find out what was going on with Lara's food. Curious yet? What will the wives discover when they confront Lara? Will the secret behind the irresistible food be revealed? The next morning, the women set out for Lara's stall. Their hearts raced with nervousness, but they knew they had no choice. They had to do something to save their marriages. When they arrived at Lara's food stall, they waited until she had a moment to spare. One of the women stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Lara, we need to talk to you. We know you're a wonderful cook, and we don't want to take that away from you. But our husbands are no longer eating our food. They say your meals are the only ones they enjoy, and it's causing problems in our homes. We kindly ask you to stop serving them. Can you please help us?" Lara looked at them, her expression unreadable. "What are you suggesting? That I turn away my customers? You want me to stop feeding the people of this village because you're jealous?" she replied, her tone sharp. The women were taken aback, but they pushed forward. "We're not jealous," one of them said. "We just want our husbands back. They're not the same anymore. They don't even care to come home after eating at your stall. Can you at least help us?" Lara's eyes narrowed. "I'm a businesswoman. I don't have time for this. If your husbands prefer my food, that's not my problem. You should learn how to cook better, like me." The woman left her stall, feeling defeated. They hadn't expected such a cold response from Lara. But they were not ready to give up just yet. Will the women find another way to get their husbands back? Or will Lara's dominance over the village continue? That evening, as the women returned home, they couldn't shake the feeling that they needed to do more. They couldn't just sit back and let Lara continue to have this kind of power over their husbands. It was time to fight back, but they knew they had to be clever about it. One of the women, Mara, an experienced cook herself, had an idea. "What if we take matters into our own hands? We could sneak into Lara's kitchen and learn her secret, whatever it is. Then, we'll make sure our husbands know that we can create meals just as delicious as hers." The group gathered at Mara's house that night, drawing up a plan. They would wait until after closing hours when Lara's stall was empty. With stealth and determination, they would slip inside her kitchen, hoping to find the mysterious ingredient or technique that made her meals so irresistible. That very night, under the cover of darkness, the women made their move. They had disguised themselves as ordinary villagers, hoping no one would recognize their intentions. As they approached Lara's stall, the street was eerily quiet. The only light came from the dim lanterns hanging outside. Mara led the way as they crept into the back of Lara's kitchen. The smell of fresh herbs and spices filled the air. The women moved carefully, trying not to make a sound. As they reached the center of the kitchen, they spotted Lara's collection of ingredients and tools, nothing too extraordinary at first glance. But then Mara's eyes fell on a small, ornate jar tucked away in a corner, nearly hidden from view. "That's it," Mara whispered, pointing at the jar. One of the women reached for it, uncapping the jar and sniffing the contents. It smelled sweet but unfamiliar, like a blend of herbs and something else, something deep and earthy. "Do you think this is it?" another woman asked. Mara nodded. "This has to be it. This is the secret. We've found it." The women made a careful note of everything in the kitchen. They needed to replicate Lara's cooking but without her knowing. With their mission complete, they slipped out of the kitchen and returned home, eager to try the new ingredients for themselves. The next day, the wives gathered at Mara's house, ready to put their newfound knowledge to the test. They had all brought their husbands' favorite recipes, but this time, they would infuse them with the secret ingredient they had uncovered. As the day went on, the kitchen was filled with the sounds of chopping, stirring, and tasting. The women were focused, determined to prove they could cook just as well as Lara, if not better. By evening, the aromas of freshly prepared meals filled the air. The wives were excited to see the look on their husbands' faces when they tasted their new dishes. When the men arrived home, they were greeted by the enticing smells of the food. At first, they hesitated. "What's going on? Why does everything smell different?" one of the husbands asked. The wives exchanged knowing glances. "We thought we'd try something new," one of them said with a smile. "Give it a taste." The men sat down, their forks digging into the food. Each bite was met with surprise, followed by a pleased murmur. This tastes just like Lara's cooking," one husband exclaimed. "In fact, I think it's even better." The women watched in silence as the men continued to eat. It was working. The magic of Lara's cooking was no longer a mystery, and it seemed their husbands were more than satisfied with their new meals. Over the next few weeks, the villagers began to notice something different. The men, once addicted to Lara's stall, started coming back to their homes. They no longer gathered at her food stall every evening. Instead, they sat down with their wives for dinner, enjoying the new, flavorful meals that were now being served in Eldora. Lara's stall, once bustling with customers, began to see fewer and fewer visitors. Slowly, her business declined. The wives of Eldora had not only reclaimed their husbands' attention but had also reclaimed their power in the kitchen. One day, as Lara walked past the marketplace, she noticed the empty tables at her food stall. For the first time in a long while, she felt a pang of doubt. She knew something had changed, but she wasn't sure what. She glanced around, her eyes locking with one of the village women who gave her a knowing smile. Lara stood still for a moment, then quietly turned away. She could no longer hold the title of Eldora's culinary queen. The women had reclaimed their rightful place, and Eldora was returning to its old rhythms, where love, family, and home-cooked meals mattered most. And so, Lara's stall faded into memory, but the village of Eldora grew even closer. The men once again enjoyed their wives' cooking, and the women learned that together, they could create something far more powerful than just a meal. They could create a future where everyone thrived.